Hey, and welcome back to Away We Go. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Andrew.
And this is the end of our first month on the road, our 365-day world trip. We just finished up our time in Panama, and we wanted to give you a complete roundup of everything that we did, everything that we spent, everywhere that we stayed. First things first, Andrew, do you want to take us through some of the numbers?
Sure. One of the things that I wanted to do when we started this trip was really track our spending and understand, just in general, what it would take and get a better understanding of what does it mean to slow travel around the world and in different parts. I will start off by saying Panama was a learning opportunity for us. I think going into it, we had high hopes that Panama was going to be like a lot of Central or South American countries where some things were a little bit more affordable. And the reality is that Panama's currency is tied to the US dollar. So a lot of the expenditures, especially food or going out for food, would be very similar to that as being in the US. In short, what we wanted to first get an understanding on was daily cost. That was just shy of $150 a day. That is taking into account five things. Where we stayed, so Airbnbs, what we ate, whether it be groceries or going out for food, as well as going out for the occasional drink. Any shopping that we did, which wasn't a lot, it was under $100 in total for all of our shopping, and then any ground transportation, so like I said, Ubers. We did make some savings back in other areas, the main one being flights. So we had budgeted over $2,000 for flights altogether. So that was us getting to Panama and then us flying within Panama. We ended up flying into Panama through Toronto, and we ended up going to David later on in the trip. All in all, that cost us just over $500. And the reason being is because that first flight from our home to Toronto and then to Panama was free. We used points that we had kind of collected through Aeroplan for the last few years, and we used a good chunk of them on this flight. In addition to that, one of the other elements that we didn't account for in our daily costs is what we kind of deem technology, and in this case, it was about $100 worth of eSIMs. I was able to manage with 5 gigs, Kayla a little bit more, because we quickly ran through it after about 3 weeks. So all in all, it was about $100. The last thing from a financial perspective that did not count in kind of the day cost of living, daily cost, if you will, is our activities. And what I mean by that is anything that we kind of did a little bit extra. So there were 3 of them that we did during our time in Panama. There was a Panama Canal visit that we hadn't planned, but that was about $50. We did a coffee tour, which we had planned, and that was about $100 Canadian. For those who've watched our previous vlogs, this does not count the cost of us then renting a tree with that coffee farm. That was a totally non-travel related cost, so we didn't really count it into this budget. And then finally, a also unexpected one that we decided to do was a catamaran tour. That was kind of like a full day. That was about $275, so it was a little bit pricier. It was a full day. We did get free drinks and food for I think like a meal and a half. So there was some value add there, and it was a great time. But yeah, that one was probably a little bit pricier. So all in all, it's about $430, $425 for our activities for Panama. That's kind of the breakdown of it. Again, some people may look at this and be like, that was a lot, and we agree. We definitely took a little bit of a hit, and I think in general we did plan a contingency fund going into this so that we would be able to handle that. And I think Panama for us was like a learning opportunity to really say, oh, we do need to cut down on certain things. One of my lessons learned from a budgeting perspective was lumping a lot of food purchases together, which is something I'm going to learn going forward. I will say it was probably 50-50 between what we spent on groceries and what we spent on eating out, which is not normal, obviously, from when we're home. It's obviously going to be a little trickier when we travel, so I think that's just kind of a lesson learned as we move forward.
If you're wondering about what exactly we did in Panama and what our route was, like Andrew said, we flew from Toronto. We actually had a stopover in Cancun, and then we landed in Panama City. But we were in Panama City for only 2 nights. So the night that we landed, and then the next night, and then we headed over to David. So our first Airbnb was actually just outside of Casco Viejo, and it made it incredibly walkable and very accessible to the rest of the city. So basically we were on this walking street, and this walking street on one end led to Casco Viejo, and on the other end led to a metro station, which could have taken us everywhere. Our first Airbnb was hosted by Elena and her co-host Jonathan, and he was the one that met us at the location. He was incredibly helpful. He gave us a lot of information about the area, and overall we really enjoyed that Airbnb. I kind of regret not having a little bit more time in that area, because I think we could have really
taken advantage
of that
it.
Area and
yeah, I think it's
how easy it was.
It was
to
the
walk.
only downside, which, you know, I guess pro content not being there super long, is it's a little bit more touristy, kind of just as you get into Casco Viejo, so things are a little bit pricier, but it's kind of finding that balance. We did have a little kitchenette, so that was kind of nice.
They did provide us with some coffee and stuff like that, so that was really nice. But one of my favorite things about this Airbnb was that they had a desk space for you, so you could set up and do whatever you wanted to at your computer and have your own little space. And they also had an outdoor patio space, which I really enjoyed. I took advantage of, and I sat in the hammock a couple times and just kind of edited.
It felt like it
TikToks
was
and
more
like
than
that.
just a bedroom. Like it felt like there was a little bit more.
After our stint in Panama City, we went right to David, and David was a 1 hour plane ride away from Panama City, and it is to the west, so it's closer to the Costa Rican border. It's more in a mountainous region and a little less city, a little more small town. We actually spent the entire week, we did 1 full week there, and we spent this week in kind of like a grandma suite. So it was an Airbnb property, and it was basically on the back of someone's house. It had a kitchen, it had a bathroom, and it was a little bit more condensed than our first Airbnb, but it had everything that we needed to spend the week there. We really liked David. This Airbnb was just around the corner from a grocery store, so we did end up doing all of our grocery shopping at this one particular grocery store. And we also had a favorite bar around the corner, a favorite brew pub around the corner, and so everything was really accessible and very, very walkable. We ended up taking a taxi or an Uber only twice, and that was once to get to the airport and once to get from the airport.
I was going to say it was from the airport to
the
the airport.
And to the airport. That was the only time we needed any sort of transportation our entire time in David, other than when we took the day trip to Boquete.
Yeah. So there is a bus system that is kind of in that region that, you know, goes from kind of major cities. So it's great to have this bus system because it costs us, I think it was like $225 each. We were very fortunate that Kayla had a point of contact with Julio, who owned our Airbnb in David, and we were kind of like, hey, how does this bus system work? And he like provided photos and provided information, and it was
very helpful.
Super helpful. So definitely recommend taking a look at it. And I know Google sometimes has like different opinions or different feedback, so it's a little bit trickier sometimes. The only downside was it wasn't 100% clear when they left or where they left or picked up from. And it kind of felt a little bit like if you were on the road on their path, as long as you flag them down, they'll pick you up. Pretty
much. The bus that we ended up getting on for our trip to Boquete was very, very nice. It was an air-conditioned, basically something that if you played any sports in high school, that's kind of what you'd take to tournaments and things like that. And it was really, really nice to be in.
It was just comfortable.
Unfortunately, the ride back was on an old school bus. Some of the seats were a little bit torn up.
The windows didn't fully close.
Yeah, I was going to say,
it rained.
Overall, the buses are hit or miss, but they are cheaper than getting something like a taxi or an Uber. After our stint in David, which I said was for a week, we ended up going back to Panama City, and we spent some time there. And I thought that we were there for 2 weeks. But it turns out we were there for 3 weeks, and we didn't really realize that we were there for 3 weeks until after the first week. So we had kind of overspent on our groceries by that point, which is probably why our numbers for our daily numbers are a little kind of wonky, and they may improve, well, hopefully improve as we go on. So the area that we were in was El Carmen, and it was a very residential area, which was great. It was very quiet. There were some schools around and a really pretty park right across the road, and we really ended up getting to know the neighborhood by the end of our 3 weeks in this area. Our host, Anna, was incredibly attentive. Every couple days, if she hadn't heard from us, she would check in with us to make sure that everything was going well, ask if we needed anything. This space was a little bit more space than we had had in the previous 2 Airbnbs, so there was kind of 2 separate spaces, although it was there was no door closing the spaces off. It did give us a little bit more separation, so you were able to put your stuff on an actual desk in a different room, and I was able to kind of hang out on the couch and watch TV.
And overall, it was just great. They had a little bit of a kitchen space, so that was kind of great. Again, we relied a lot on groceries,
So one of the downsides to this space, which affected Andrew a little bit more than it affected me, is that his area that was kind of separated and where he had his desk and the daybed didn't get the cool air from the heat pump the way that the rest of the house got the heat pump. And I like to be warm, Andrew likes to be cold, and this provided a...
It's like the opposite then.
Yeah,
you were
exactly.
Getting the AC.
I was getting incredibly cold. I ended up having to take the blanket from the daybed.
Yes.
Because
that's right.
I was just so cold because you wouldn't let me turn the heat pump off because you were getting absolutely no coolness in that area. So that was a little bit of a downside. But on the plus side, we ended up having a laundry machine, which we didn't have at our previous Airbnb. We also had a lot of great outdoor space. So we had a hammock, there were some patio chairs, there was a spa, which is basically like a hot tub, like a little jacuzzi thing. And it was an amazing opportunity to have some outdoor time in the middle of the day. We didn't have to go far to actually enjoy the sun and just kind of hang out.
One of the things that we often looked at, and this will probably come up throughout our trip as we mention it, is we look for places that have like good Wi-Fi and that kind of boast the fact that they have good Wi-Fi or solid Wi-Fi, and we look at reviews and we look at what hosts will post about it and stuff like that. And we got very fortunate with the spaces that we've chosen. I will say there was one downside that came up when we stayed at this last place, in that it's that we shared a Wi-Fi hub or an internet hub with another apartment, I think. So there were times, especially later in the day, where the internet would like slow or even drop or not connect, and it would be a struggle. It almost felt like a neighbor war, because I would feel like, you know, sometimes we would like restart the internet to try to fix it, and then they would try to do that. It was just a little bit of a nuisance, and I'm starting to realize that there is a difference between like internet speeds and internet ping, and I think the biggest thing is like getting reliable internet versus just fast internet.
Anyways, that was Panama City as far as where we stayed, and we really enjoyed all of them. Which one was your favorite?
Of where we stayed?
Yeah.
Overall, I preferred our last place in terms of like layout. I think I really enjoyed the fact that, to your point, we had that bigger space, a separated space, whatnot. I don't know if we've talked about it in other videos, but it was up a spiral staircase, which is not ideal when you're carrying luggage and stuff like that, but that's neither here nor there.
I agree. I think that was probably my favorite because we had a little bit more space there. I could have my own area, you could have your own area, and that was really nice, and that is very hard to find when you're on the road with the same person for a year, and I'm sure that we'll find other spaces like that, hopefully. But I also really loved Via Argentina, which was really close to our last spot in Barrio. It was just very walkable, lots of bars,
I was gonna say, if you
lots
saw our
of
last
craft
vlog,
beer.
we hit up a bunch of those spots. As will probably be obvious, with location comes price. So just as an example, the first place, which was near Casco Viejo, was closer to like $90 a night, whereas this place, the last place we stayed, was in the 60 to 70 range.
Yeah.
Now, we also stayed there 19 days, so I think you got a discount for longer stays, which helped. But because it was a little bit outside of that nicer area, it's a little bit cheaper.
And then David, which was in a completely different town, a little less desirable than, say, Panama City, was even cheaper than those.
Oh my god, yes.
Overall, I really liked Panama. What would you rate it out of a 10?
I'd probably give it a 6. There was a lot of great stuff, and I think from a language perspective, we got along very well, and we were able to kind of like navigate and communicate with people very well, and I think there was a lot to do. I think it does take a ding because it is probably one of the more expensive places in Central and South America from like a dollar value perspective. I would also say on the downside, there are parts that, you know, may not have been the cleanest or may have not have been the quietest. And I think it's kind of like, I feel rude saying that, but I think it was like recognizing as well as like, where do I want to travel back to? And I know you and I had this discussion, which is like, would we want to come back here? So I don't know. I think I'd visit Panama, but I'd be in no rush to do it again.
I think I'm probably around the same. I was going to go 7, but listening to you talk about it, I think maybe I am more on the 6 side. I think I'd give it a 6 because it was a very nice country. I really loved the people. The people were great.
The people were the best part. The people were the best part, hands down.
Were so nice. They had good craft beer, which is something that I always look for. I found that as far as the cuisine goes, a lot of the Panamanian cuisine is kind of overshadowed by a lot of other types of cuisine. They have a lot of immigrants, and therefore the cuisine has kind of adapted to whoever is coming to stay and live in Panama, and it is a very easy place to immigrate to. And so that kind of lends itself to it. But like, we had really good Italian, and there were a bunch of Indian restaurants. We had Peruvian. The only time that we really had Panamanian food was one of our last weekends when we finally went to Sabroso. And also if we were having street food like empanadas.
I know we had talked that if we ever did come back, it would probably be to do something like Bocas del Toro, where it's a little bit more of like a beach vibe, a little bit more Caribbean, or San Blas.
What was your favorite restaurant?
I think my favorite one might have been Coca-Cola Cafe. It was the first one we went to, but it had kind of like a pretty basic, simple breakfast, and they have their, and I don't know the name, you do, but like, what's that bread? Hojaldres, which is like their puffed pastry bread sort of thing, which was delicious.
I think as far as food went, I really liked Luca, but it was Italian.
Oh, dang, that was a good
one. It was like really good Napoli-style pizza in Panama. It was very weird and random and tucked into a back alley, but I really liked it, and it was delicious. What was your favorite bar or brewery?
No, not even a competition, you know this. It's Animal Brew. Animal Brew is a micro brew that is on top of a sushi place. Just to clarify, they don't brew their stuff on top of a sushi place, but that's where they like serve it. So they had anywhere from 8 to 12 different taps, depending on the days that we went. They had such a great variety of beers. They had great prices.
I did like Animal Brew. Maybe not as much as you. You loved it.
Loved it. I would highly recommend it.
If I was to say, like, what was my favorite beer, I think Cerveceria Central had my favorite beers.
Okay.
I had a lot of great ones there. They had the Dinah Sour. They had a Mango Sour. They had some really good IPAs. So I really liked their beer. But location-wise, meh. I have to say I really loved Hops, and that became, like, one of our go-to places when we were in David. The staff was just really nice. It got to the point where we would walk in at the end of the week and they would look at us and be like, Balboa? And we'd be like, no, today we're going to get something different. But it was kind of cool that by the end they knew what our order was.
So that's fair. I didn't consider Hops. I was going to say my second was Rana Dorada because I just really enjoyed both their vibe and the different beers they had. I thought they were also just the people who worked there were super nice.
Okay, what was your favorite overall day?
Catamaran wins it for best overall day because it was a great day. There's a lot of great vibes and a lot of great memories. And then we got super burnt, super drunk, and then we ordered McDonald's. And that's always a great way to end the day.
Yeah. Very hard for me to pick a favorite day. I kind of want to pick a favorite weekend, and it would be that weekend, the weekend that we did the Catamaran. But the day before that, we also went for coffee with some UNB alumni. We ended up accidentally going to the IMAX and watching that movie on the Panama Canal. We went to the Albrook Mall and just kind of walked around there.
Yeah, that's true.
Is there anything that we did that you regret doing, or you think that it's kind of a miss? Like, you don't need to do it if you visit?
The Albrook Mall is a massive mall, and it has a lot of cool stuff, and there's a lot of, but like, if you're traveling and you're not looking to buy stuff, there's nothing in it that is going to be mind-blowing. No. Is it cool? Yes. Is it the craziest mall I've ever been to? No. Like, I've been to malls that I've like actually been blown away by, like what's in it.
Mall.
West Edmonton. I've never been to the West Edmonton. No, that's a lie. I did go to the West Edmonton Mall once, but there's like one in India that I went to that was like had like a skating rink inside and had like an escape room inside. Like, there was a lot of stuff going on, and that I was like, this is a pretty sick mall. So this one, to me, I was just kind of like, it's a big mall with a big food court.
For me, the biggest one would be if we had done Casco Viejo in one day, I would have been okay with that, versus like we did an evening once and then we did kind of like part of a day. I think if we had just spent the whole day in Casco Viejo, I could have gotten that out of my system. Like, you don't really need to spend a ton of time there.
It's pretty.
It's pretty. It's very easy to walk around, and you can pretty much walk the whole thing in one day. You can see everything you need to, and so I don't think you need more time than that.
I would also recommend that we spent a whole week in David and then a day in Boquete. I would spend a few days in Boquete, possibly like 2 or 3. It's just a very cute kind of traveler's city, and I think there's a lot of great like restaurants and shops there and things to do. There's hikes, and we kind of just went there for the coffee tour. And once we arrived, I was like, damn, this is a nice town. Like,
I do know that there are a ton of immigrants there, a ton of people from the U.S. who have immigrated and whatnot, and so a lot of Boquete speaks more English than the rest of Panama, and so I think along with that comes higher prices as well. So that would be the only downside to staying in Boquete a little longer.
Yeah.
Overall, that was our trip to Panama.
Yeah.
We really enjoyed it. And now we're off to Peru, which is really exciting. I've been to Peru before. You have not. Peru is going to be our 15th country together.
Oh, right. Sorry, that's true. I was just, to that point, Panama was my 15th country.
Yes.
That I've ever been to.
Super exciting. I'm really excited to tell you about Peru eventually, but also for you to see it. And for you to see it.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. That'll be out next week. We'll be showing you our first bit of time in Peru and show you what we're getting up to. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Share this with your friends if you are planning a trip to Panama, or if they are planning a trip to Panama. It might be useful.
And if you have any questions or want to chat Panama, leave it down in the comments. Happily respond.
Find us on social media. We'll leave the links for our social medias down in the comments as well, so you can reach out to us there as well. Yes, thank you.
Take care.
Bye.